Before I ask for an adoption of the agenda, Mr. Daly, are there any additions?
No, Madam Mayor.
Yes, there is an in-camera. Right?
Oh yeah, I guess I came a little late. No additions to the regular agenda.
But we do have an email. Okay. Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
First, second, Councilor McIlravey. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Minutes of the regular meeting of council dated January 27th, 2021. Could I have a motion to adopt those minutes?
So moved.
So Ribbit, second. Councilor McIlravey. Any discussion, errors, omissions? Hearing none, all in favor? Carried. Delegations? None. Yeah. That is actually later in the report, but we can do that now. So we have Sandy McKay with our housing needs report.
We are muted, Madam Mayor. If you just want to hit the space bar, you can unmute momentarily and address Mr. McKay.
And hit the space bar.
You have to hold it down.
Here.
Oh, I'm back on mute again.
No, if you just hold it down and tell them we're ready to go.
We're ready to go, Mr. McKay?
I think he's muted though.
He's muted.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Just quickly, can you all hear me and see the screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. Sorry, apologies. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second to introduce myself. My name is Sandy Mackey. I'm the Housing Research and Policy Lead at Local Development Services. I'm really excited to be here today to present the findings of the Village of Logan Housing Needs Report. And thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for having me tonight. Apologies that I can't be there in person, but the realities of COVID-19 are limiting our travel here. And the last thing I want to do is bring something to your community and understanding that rural communities are particularly vulnerable at this time. We thought it best to engage with you over Zoom. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll work through the findings of the report. And after I'm finished, please feel free to ask me any questions you got. I'm happy to answer them as best as I can. And if I can't answer tonight, I will plan to get back to you via email. So. Before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional territories on which our offices are located. We work just outside of Victoria on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen, the Shwet'suwet'en, and Wilson peoples. And I'd also like to acknowledge the funding support for this project through the United BC municipalities, without whom the project would not have been very much appreciated. Participating in this study was not only the Village of Clinton, but also the City of Merritt, Cache Creek, Logan Lake, Water, and Sun Peaks, along with all of the rural areas surrounding. This was really valuable, taking a regional approach. It allowed us to collect engagement feedback from across your region and use that to generate better information on what your housing trends folks in your community are facing. It also allows us to look at the electoral areas and surrounding rural areas around your community, which helps us draw better conclusions about what's actually happening in the Village of Clinton, and understanding that housing issues are not something that respects municipal borders. So it's really important to maintain that regional approach when you have work. In your report, there's a couple of different things. So we've included a lot of information on what is happening, the local and regional demography, households, incomes, economy, and affordability. We've also included information on who it's happening to. So that's things like engagement data, your affordability analysis, and which income groups and household types are struggling the most. What's not in your report is the sort of next step, the implementation piece, where new housing should go, the form where density it should take, those sorts of things. That's up to you to decide how to act through things like your OCP, through zoning zoning bylaw updates, partnership development, community education, and more. The report itself has 6 key components. The 2 that you probably as decision makers should be the most aware of are pieces 1 and 2. Number 1 is the complete Village of Clinton housing needs report. It's probably what we shared with you in your agenda tonight. It has all the information I've described above, including demography, income, those sorts of pieces. It also meets the requirements of the provincial ministry who's responsible for overseeing this project, so you're able to check that box and know who you're a little over that. But perhaps maybe more useful to you, especially how you're communicating with your constituents, is the community housing summary. It's a 4-page document that gives a high-level summary of all the different data indicators that were available for this project. It is presented in a highly visual infographic fashion. So you don't have to be a planner, you don't have to be someone who works in municipal government to understand it. It should be fairly easy to understand for any member of your community. Just pick up that document and read it. Might be useful for you when you're trying to share information on this report. We've included a couple of other pieces there for you as well. A housing tools and policy guide to help kickstart maybe that next step for you. An indicators and monitoring guide, which will help you monitor your housing trends moving forward and into the next sort of 5-year review of this project that is mandated through the Local Government Act. We've included a full engagement summary report. So in your report, there is engagement that's specific to the Village of Clinton. But if you're interested in going deeper into how we gathered the information and looking at the full breadth of information that we recovered through that engagement process, that is a much more in-depth document that you can look at. And lastly, there's some data tables. Those are mostly for reference for your staff and are unlikely to be useful to you as a decision maker. They're really about making sure that the ministry sees all of the specific requirements that it has being checked off directly. That's what that is for. So on to the key points, the fun part. One thing I will say about the Village of Clinton is that you actually are starting in a relatively advantageous position. A lot of communities that we work in are in that sort of quote-unquote housing crisis situation. You're not there yet. There is definitely some room to play with, and you've got some time to begin to address these issues before they become untenable in Clinton. You're still reasonably affordable, especially to households making above to moderate incomes. And overall, your housing conditions, according to some metrics, actually improved from 2006 to 2016. However, conditions worsened for renters in your community. 31% of your renters, close to a third, are in core housing need, which is kind of the best catch-all stat we have to describe housing, a tenuous housing situation. You have an aging population, which I will talk about. It's going to present some challenges and a need for different types of housing, along with some specialized supports. Rental availability continues to be a challenge, not only in the region, but across the region. And some of the trends we're seeing indicate that more people are renting. And lastly, especially as COVID-19 has shown us, housing markets are expanding, and pressures from the Lower Mainland and Kamloops may start to come to Clinton in greater numbers. We're already seeing a lot of folks who be buying second properties or those sort of amenity migrants that are looking to escape larger centers and have more access to green space. So though you're in a good starting point, it should encourage, this report should encourage action, not complacency. So into the sort of demographic findings, starting with your population, how it's changing. You actually experienced a pretty interesting spike in population between 2006 and 2016, 14% increase on the last census. However, our projection models predict a bit of a leveling off and even a slight decline until 2026. So, but that's still up 10% over the past 20-year period, which is great for you. And something to pay attention to, though, is that even though your population has only gone up about 10%, your household demand is expected to go up about 23%. And that's really interesting and will have a lot of implications for how you encourage development moving forward or how you meet the needs of your population moving forward. We see that household size is declining, which means that less people are living in each home. That often happens as your population ages. You go from having a family and maybe 4 or 3 people in the home to just having a couple, so maybe just 2 people and eventually even just 1 person in a home. So as that happens, you require more homes to meet the demand of your population. It also happens because family structures are changing. Divorce rates are up, and often we're seeing that families now require 2 homes for 1 family. So that's something to keep in mind, and just seeing how much that household demand is increasing compared to your population demand is really important to keep track of. mentioned, your population is getting older, and this is really demonstrating that trend. So I've broken down your population in 2006 on the far left, 2016 in the middle, and 2026 on the far right. These are breaking it down by age cohorts. So that big yellow chunk is the population age 25 to about 64, so the typical working age population. The green and blue spaces, however, these two that are circled, these represent your population over the age of 65. And in 2006, that was about a quarter of your population. And by 2026, we expect it to be more than 40% of your population, which has huge implications on the types of housing that you need in order to support those folks. Many of the older residents that we spoke to throughout this project were worried about their ability to maintain larger properties and unable to downsize because of cost or availability. There's a couple of great quotes here. Seniors housing would free up family homes for sale or rent, so folks looking to move out of those larger home situations and into smaller senior-oriented housing units. And this one here, currently there are no rentals available. This impacts businesses who need employees, and there are many single seniors living in family-sized homes as there's no suitable seniors housing available. So not only would providing affordable and accessible housing, particularly rental housing that's available to seniors, help house that particular section of your community, it may also open up larger homes for younger families to move into. We're also seeing that this is highlighting a need for home care and semi-supported or supported living options. And of course, housing closer to amenities or services. Just because a home is affordable and the right size, if it's too far away from a pharmacy or grocery store, as people get older and are unable to operate a personal vehicle, that becomes a real challenge and makes that home inappropriate for that person. So some of the ways forward are looking at land use decisions that prioritize multi-unit housing and housing close to your active and public transportation corridors. So places where it's easy to walk to the store, or you can easily take your bike, things like that. Ways to eliminate the amount of personal vehicle travel that seniors and older residents have to do. And one thing that really came up is that seniors are looking for smaller, more manageable units, but not necessarily less bedrooms. Seniors do not have a ton of interest in moving into a one-bedroom apartment. They really like that second or third bedroom for either an activity space or so they can have family come to visit. So definitely not interested in shoveling or mowing the lawn anymore, but still want a very small outdoor space where they can maybe walk the dog or garden a little bit, and enough bedrooms that they can do family visit. Moving on to some sort of a bit about tenure, a big piece to look at is the renters in your community. We're seeing that across the region, the rates of rentership is rising and rising across almost all age cohorts. This graph is showing the rates of rentership in 2016 in the yellow, and the rates of rentership in 2006 in the blue. And what you can kind of notice here is that the most important categories are between 5 and about 20, and between about 30 and about 55. In those age cohorts, people are renting at substantially higher rates than they were even 10 years ago. And so what we're seeing is those age cohort brackets sort of coincide with younger families and families with school-age children. And that is concerning because as renting becomes more expensive and it is more difficult to find, we're seeing that at the same time, renter incomes are not rising at a rate that is even matching inflation. It's certainly not rising at a rate that is competing with owners. Owners have far more ability to meet their housing needs than renters do. Just as a way of showing that in Clinton, your median renter household income is about $27,000 a year. Your median owner household income is close to $50,000 a year. So it's almost double. And your median owner household income went up 10% over the last census period, whereas renter household income decreased by 12%. So clearly renters are struggling in your community, not only with availability, but also with cost. And more and more, it's younger families renting at increasingly expensive rates. And that has implications for your community. Many employers reported that housing directly affects their ability to attract and retain workers in key industries, not just tourism and retail, to industries that we typically associate with temporary renters or with folks who are renting for a short period of their life. But it happens with construction workers, teachers, nurses, even municipal workers. Some of them were having trouble finding housing in the rental market. This is a couple of really good quotes quotes here. There's a lot of low-income families in Clinton that do not have access to better quality housing. Absolutely. We're worrying about how we are going to pay our rent, and it's becoming a concern. And then last person is saying that additional rental housing like apartments, secondary suites, and townhomes would help those who are trying to rent. So again, very similar to seniors. This highlights a need for more dedicated, affordable, and appropriate rental options. This along with housing for workers in key industries and housing for families and individuals. So one way to go forward with this is to look at prioritizing purpose-built rentals. So those are buildings that are developed explicitly to be rental units. Looking at expanding infill permissions or suite permissions, so allowing people to put suites in their sort of basements or in infill sort of garden suites, things like that. And then looking at protecting your existing stock. So when you do have an affordable rental building, how do you work with the operator to make sure that they're keeping it in good condition? What are you doing in terms of bylaw enforcement and its untitled premises bylaws? How are you maintaining that stock in your community? And within the admittedly limited powers that you have as a local government. But it's not just renters. Owner-occupied housing is more expensive as well. Median house prices are steadily rising, and actually 2019, which is the last year we were able to collect data from the study, was your largest sales year by volume in the last decade. We sold about 22 properties that we sold, which is fairly high compared to the last few years. And as you can see by this graph, which is charting the inflation-adjusted price of housing in your community, your total market is up about 24% over the past 10 years, from 2010 to 2019. But really, you hit kind of a bottom in 2013 or 2014, and since then, prices have almost doubled, going from an average of around between 50 and 100,000 to closer to 150 or 200 or 150 or 175,000, adjusted again, all adjusted for inflation to 2019 dollars. Engagement also indicates that market housing is becoming harder to enter for middle to low income earners and single income households. Again, Clinton is still relatively affordable, but folks who are making in those lower income brackets are finding the jump between sort of a rental tenure and an owner tenure much more difficult than they did even 5 or 10 years ago. In our engagement, renters and owners both reported that they were challenged in the current housing market. 34% of all of our survey respondents indicated that their current housing is unaffordable. When we asked that question to just renters, it jumped to 65%. And when we asked folks what they thought were going to be their biggest housing concerns in the next 5 years, they gave us a number of things, but the most ones that stuck out for us were cost of utilities and cost of maintaining their home, as well as the physical ability to maintain their home. So again, that's being that senior population, so for small units. And then a big one, cost of housing, distances to services, and stability. So that's often folks who are in renter tenures who are worried about their rental unit disappearing over winter. And the last couple of quotes here, this person saying that availability of housing is a key concern, and available residential housing is non-existent. New residential housing, both homes and apartments. Rental units are in high demand with usually zero vacancy. And again, all these quotes are just from residents. So that for us indicates that the market is not necessarily capable of solving all of your housing problems. And what you probably need to be looking at is how you can support more non-market and supportive housing options. There were limited applications on the wait list, but we did see anecdotally that the numbers of people living with friends or staying with family are also something we call hidden homelessness. There are folks who are technically homeless but would not necessarily self-identify as such. Those rates are going up. And as well, many respondents to the survey reported unsafe housing conditions, poor housing conditions, and a general increase in sort of stress and worry related to housing insecurity. Nothing to buy or rent in Clinton. And this last one, one-size-fits-all model of development doesn't really work for smaller rural communities. And I think that's really important. As a small rural community, it's important to be creative with these things, to look at which partners you have in your community, look at what nonprofits are interested in operating some of this housing, and sort of acting as the wheel greaser at the local government level to attract funding and support those development applications. So again, highlights need for us for those dedicated, affordable, and appropriate rental options, as well as some alternative tenure models. So often when we talk about secured affordable housing or housing that's affordable in perpetuity, we're talking about nonprofit operators Typically, it would be operated by a nonprofit, but usually supported through subsidy from BC Housing and the provincial government. So you can't do it all on your own as a municipality. There is a need for increased funding from state and local government, and a great place for you to sort of facilitate that development is in advocating upwards to local government, and then advocating downwards as well, right? Helping educate your community to reduce stigma around supported and affordable uses, looking at maybe a land acquisition and disposal strategy that prioritizes disposal to nonprofit organizations looking to develop and maintain housing. And then some other things you can do are exploring incentives and just encouraging that nonprofit development where you can. And my last piece here, I just wanted to show you this last graph that really shows which groups are struggling most in your community. This is rates of poor housing needs amongst different household types. And you can see that the folks with the most stability and the lowest rates of poor housing need are families, often because they have two incomes. So families with children, very low rates, and families without children, also very low rates. Lone parents, however, are struggling immensely to meet their housing needs. About a third of all lone parents are in poor housing need. When we look at folks with Indigenous identity who are lone parents, 50% are in poor housing need, and it's only about 27% of those who have a settler identity or non-Indigenous. And similarly high for singles and roommates. This usually represents seniors, so older residents, or the youngest residents of your community who are on their own for the first time. So if you are looking at places to prioritize intervention, these population groups clearly need most assistance in Clinton and across the Thompson-Nicola Regional District. So the next steps, there is a part of the Local Government Act regulations that require you to adopt this report by resolution. As well, you're required to post the report on your on your website. I've already spoken to your CAO with, and he's got the sort of direct information that you need in order to meet those requirements. Before the end of this project, we're hoping to host a staff training. You are required to complete this report again on about a 5-year cycle, and we aren't sure what the funding program is going to look like at that time. So we're hopefully going to be able to give your staff a bit of information on how they can repeat this themselves, and at the very least cut the costs of going out to a consultant, or hopefully maybe even do it in-house. And then finally, we'll be sharing the results of the study with a broader community group and hopefully having a conversation about next steps and establishing some partnership agreements and looking at how we can collectively act on the findings of this report across the region. Both of those will be announced shortly. We are hoping to do it when we can meet safely in person, because it's just more effective that way. And that's it. I'll end by thanking the key stakeholders and members of the community who participated in the study, who shared their experience, and participated in interviews groups. And a big thanks to the staff for setting up this and our last meeting. And I appreciate their support through the project. That's it for me. If you have any questions at all, I'll happily take them. Or if you don't have anything tonight, but maybe as you're reading through the reports, you've got an additional question, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help over the next few months if these things come up.
Any councilors have any questions for Mr. Massey? Not at the moment.
No.
Okay, I don't think we have any questions at the moment, but thank you very much for your presentation. There's a lot of information to digest.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just the highlights. The report itself is quite long. So again, if you have any questions at all, just use that email and I will happily sort of walk you through sections or answer some of the nuanced questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
You too.
Good night.
Okay, that was interesting. So, Mr. Daly, did we have any questions come in on our website from the question thing we have on there? Oh,
None that I was made aware of this afternoon.
okay, good. So moving on. That's my finger. Correspondence for action. Clinton Communities in Bloom Beautification Society grant and aid application for Seedy Sunday event. Councillor McIlravey, this is your portfolio. Do you wish to speak to this?
I don't know too much about what's going on this, I'll be honest. Other than it's just, I think it's a yearly event that's held every
Mhm.
year. This year I know they were talking about trying to do it outside.
In the
At
community
community
garden?
garden, which I think would be a good thing if we're able to do that.
Mhm.
Gives residents a little bit of more idea of our community garden under CIB.
So I guess what they're asking for is council's permission to
To
hold the Seedy Sunday on April 11th in or beside the Clinton Community Garden.
Which is normally our date for doing it.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Sure. Can I bring a motion to host, for CIB to host their annual,
Or to approve their?
or to approve their annual Seedy Sunday for Sunday, April 11th, 2021 at the community garden site.
Seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Burge? Any discussion?
Mayor, I just have
Councillor
one.
Burge?
They have down here total budget for project the grant has been applied for, $300. Do we charge them, or is there a charge on the community garden? Or is that just
No.
left over from when they used the hall?
I think this is their budget for the event.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, that's what they're spending, right? Okay,
Yeah.
yep, got it.
Councillor Park?
Just curious, we need in the actual motion, they mentioned that they're gonna do it obviously with COVID-19 protocols. Does it have to be in the motion that they
Yeah.
follow, as long as they follow or pertain to, if any orders change during that time?
I would think that maybe we should put that in just to kind
Would
of
you
have it
like
as.
to make a friendly amendment?
I'll make a friendly amendment that CIB follows any COVID-19 rules and regulations at that point in time.
That's okay with the seconder
Yes.
to add that? Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Carried. Okay, items for information, and if you want to speak to any of these, please stop me, otherwise I'll just list them. Interior Health Staffing Announcement. Ministry of Transportation, changes to pilot car requirements and travel time windows in BC. School District 74, virtual meeting procedures for Board of Education open meetings. Thompson-Nicola Regional District, changes to TNRD free disposal day events. That was in response to the letter they received from the District of Logan Lake. So they've outlined all the items that are free of charge year-round at their sites, for anyone's interest. Receive those for information, please. We have a reading file from January 22nd to February 4th, 2021. There's 20 items on it. If any of council is interested in having a look at any of those, they can check with the staff at the front counter. We'll see those for information. Administrative reports, CAO, Animal Control Bylaw.
Madam Mayor, do I need to step out for this?
If you feel you're in a conflict of interest, that's your decision.
I will step out on this because it's pertaining to my family member and my residents.
And four-legged family member?
That too. Soon gravity.
So the purpose of this is to examine the provisions of the Animal Control Bylaw as it relates to the keeping of livestock for 4-H club projects. So currently, the Village of Clinton Animal Control Regulation, Control and Licensing Bylaw provide for the care and keeping of animals within the Village of Clinton. The bylaw includes regulation livestock and the keeping of such animals in residential areas. Administration received a request from Council McIlravey on behalf of her daughter Libby to examine the regulations specifically related to the 4-H projects and the keeping of livestock in residential areas. So without reading through all of that, there is a recommendation that council direct staff to review the Village of Clinton Animal Regulation Control and Licensing Bylaw. And I would think that means all areas of the bylaw, not just,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it'd be good practice anyway to do the review in conjunction with our zoning bylaw review, that there might be sort of complementary issues that arise that we need to address either in one or the other.
Mayor?
yes, sir?
I agree with the CEO, and also as well as that we've had a few years to live with this bylaw since it was enacted, and of course, and like anything, things come up, such as the letter that was received that you addressed now that we might see now and maybe change and nip some things in the bud too.
Mhm.
So I think it's the recommendation is warranted.
So would someone care to make a motion?
I'll make that motion. I'll make a motion that council direct staff to review the Village of Clinton Animal Regulation Control and Licensing Bylaw.
I'll second it.
Any more discussion on that? Councilor Burge?
Would this be something that a working group would put together, or would it be staff only?
No, I don't think that staff would be charged with doing this alone.
Okay.
It would be either certainly a working group, or at the very least some feedback from the general public, whether it's like I say again, going back to the zoning bylaw is very timely. If we include some of those questions with the survey that's going out for the zoning bylaw, and how do you feel the need for regulation of farm type animals or livestock within the village proper?
Mhm.
And then we can come back. I mean, this isn't going to be something that can be solved in a month.
No.
It's going to be something we take like I say, it's not I agree with the mayor that it's not a reactionary thing. We're not going to focus in on this one element of it. That
Mhm.
we should take a holistic approach to it and review it as a whole and get some good feedback from the community. And as Councilor Parks pointed out, this is, bylaw that's been in place for a number of years now. We can see how it's working and where it's failing and where it needs some tweaks. And we have a working group with definitely some further feedback in shaping that bylaw.
Mhm.
It is very timely with the zoning bylaw, because we need the public input as well, so.
And just
Councilor
another comment, just that with our pandemic we're going through, we see people wanting changes to have some, like the chickens in their home and that kind of thing. So I think it's
More
very timely to
self-sufficient.
do, yeah.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Carried. Would someone like to call Councilor McIlravey back in?
He's got to find her.
She's hiding.
He must have come with me now.
Okay, we have a report from Public Works Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. This is to apply for a fund, or a grant, to do flood risk assessment, flood mapping, and flood mitigation planning. Funding would be up to $150,000 and would be 100% funded through the grant. Would someone like to move that recommendation?
I'll make that recommendation. The council directs staff to allow True to apply for funding on the village's behalf for the flood plain mapping and mitigation plan portion of the work through CEPF.
Which is the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. Seconder?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Fire department, none. Animal control, none. Please, none. We have no bylaws. policies, council reports. Okay, you have my council report in front of you. I did have a meeting today by request with two ladies from the Museum Society. They are going to be coming to council with a request at a future date. Gold Country participants virtual meeting, the TNRD. I was a little surprised to find that the Village of Clinton is the only municipality that is not raising the amount that they're providing for Gold Country. All the other communities and areas step up.
Of course.
My TNRD board meeting and committee of the whole meeting, it was confirmed this week, it will be by Zoom. And that's about all I have. Any questions for me on my report? Okay, Councilor Burridge.
My report there is, as I submitted it. If you notice, I took out my portfolio things because of the conflict that might be arising, so I just took them off my report. And I do have a comment and observation to make that I think is probably a good village concern, is while doing the bingo thing, looking for addresses. This town is terrible for houses displaying their addresses and businesses. And I was talking to Constable Masters, and she says it's horrible. So I don't know, I'm gonna write something up, but I think there has to be something, if we can help people out to put signage, because the Lions did those signs, maybe people couldn't afford them, remember the reflective ones? You know, we have paramedics coming from, not here, Lillooet, 100 Mile, Ashcroft, that may not know Joe's house. Same with the RCMP. Fire, well, most of them live here and they have a little more knowledge. But I think this is a concern, and I don't know how we can support it or go about it, but anyway, so that was an observation that I had. And yeah. So.
Right, yeah, next question. And just on top of what you just said, Councillor Burge, is that exactly, it's so funny you said that, because I was having this thought. My mother was actually just in a emergency issue, and they had outside responders come in that actually they were even from here, but of course you don't hear whose place it is, you just have an address. And it was exactly that. They drove by her property, and it, for fault of her not having her sign on there. But the and I thought exactly back to that when the Lions had their initiative to do the signage, and the ones you see, like on your house, you drive by, it's illuminated at night, you can see it's well lit. That we should definitely at least help or try to find partner up with an organization, whether it be fire department or another, to try to do initiative again. Actually having to do this every so many years and try to, because it is, especially with the aging population, and just as you pointed out, the first responders that come from out of town, and I'm assuming they don't give names when they have an under, so they don't go by addresses, and it is an issue there for sure. So that's definitely a concern for sure. So
I was thinking it was actually the fire department that had done it before, but
I thought it was too, but it was the Lions, yeah.
Lions
So,
Club.
Yeah.
It was the Lions Club?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe, anyways.
It's certainly something we can follow up and look into. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Councilor Burridge? Councilor McIlravey?
I don't have too much going on. I did get a chance to meet the board members of Gold Country. Very nice, very awesome people. They will be having an AGM coming up here soon, dates to be announced. As for my other committees, there's been some chatter with Spirit of Clinton to do a Zoom meeting, just not sure when. And then just with CIB, trying to plan the Seedy Sunday. And that's it.
Any questions for Councilor McIlravey? No? Councilor Park?
No meetings to report in the last 2 weeks here.
Okay. I had a question for you, regarding the fire department. I was asked if the fire department is looking to be vaccinated for the COVID-19.
I wouldn't have an answer for that. We have to, maybe have the CEO ask the chief, I guess, maybe. Might be appropriate, but.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Rivet.
My meetings are just starting up again, so I do not have anything to report at this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
If I, sorry, if I may back up a bit, is there a program or something, or did they issue that they might be doing that for first responders? They're not first responders actually, but they're, I guess.
Well, they are emergency responders.
Yeah, but they're not designated as first responders, I mean, they're
emergency responders.
But
I haven't heard of a program, but I was
Okay.
asked if they want to go on a list.
Okay.
And it would be up to each individual, of course, whether they choose to be vaccinated or not.
I'm just curious.
Okay, thank you. So if we could receive those reports for information. List of outstanding council previous action items. So we have infrastructure planning grant. The council allows staff to apply for the infrastructure planning grant. That's in process, or in progress. Been applied for, we're just waiting to hear. iPads. The chief financial officer will check the budget for laptops or fix any of the iPads that aren't working properly. And that's in progress. Direction to staff to get more information from Cadosa before proceeding further. That was on the rec site. Mr. Daly, did we have any further information on that that you can share?
I believe there's some emails back and forth with, I believe, Councilor Rivet. Clarifying to what Cadosa was asking for.
Okay.
And the last bit of it was just to confirm ownership of that property, whether it was, what the village's stake in it is and what we are actually okaying or what we're needed to give our blessing on it. If it's crown land, we really don't have much to provide an opinion on it.
What I read from those emails was that they're looking for the village to say that we have no concern with them proceeding with this. And at this point, I don't know, are we ready to say that?
You've got to remember, it's Crown land. I think it's a courtesy that they're doing it for us.
Yeah.
And certainly, if it does get approved, it will have to meet the standards of any rec site that they have, like garbage cans, etc.
Yeah.
So the letter was just more or less a courtesy to say, we want to be partners with the village. So, really and truly, I think if they meet all the demands of the ministry for that to become recognized, then, I think we should just give them their blessings. They're the ones that have done all the work on it.
Would you like to make a motion?
I will make a motion that I don't know how we'd like to word this, that the village
Has no objections?
has no objections to them making it an overnight campsite.
Provincially
Eventually
approved.
Yeah,
approved
approved, yeah.
campsite.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? Councilor Park?
I'd just like to reiterate, I don't think it has anything to do with, at least with the discussion of the previous council meeting, was not to dissuade or anything against that. It was more of the lack of information supplied and the years in between when the information was given, we saw these events taking place. So it was a catch-up of what the previous council now. So, but the only really question was does the village have any interest in there? Not because it's a negative thing, but do we have to any legality or anything like that? I think that's what in my mind. So, so if you guys are okay with that part, then if there is nothing that's from the village, and just want a blessing, well, that's just a letter of support, then I don't see no issue at all, right? But that's in my mind when I was making the discussion, at least in that discussion, that was from my point of view, was just making sure that we didn't have to have any permissions. That's all, and whether that was actually taken care of. So So, and I think it was construed as, I don't know, like, I read the email string and it kind of seemed like it was a little, like we're trying to be negative about it, which I don't think.
No.
Sorry, so.
No, we just needed clarity.
Yeah, exactly, so
Yeah.
I just wanna make, you know,
Yeah.
we understand that.
I think perhaps the other council worked more because the trails were happening at that time.
Yeah.
So they had more of a knowledge of it.
Yeah, well, I was on the trails, and
So-
I honestly didn't, I can't either remember or was knowledge of it, so that's one reason we wanted to have the information. So, but through, I read the letter strings that you have, and everything I was reading was secondhand information coming from one of the counselors talking to a person from Cadosa, so I never heard anybody from Cadosa come and represent. That's what I meant by that. So. So honestly, I am no more, and I've actually talked to Robin about it as well on Cadosa, and I'm still not 100% sure of what was going on there, but to be honest with you, so.
And just to speak, I know Cadosa wanted to meet and be part of the Trails Plan,
Right.
working group,
Yeah,
but then, you know, COVID happened and we never
Yeah.
got all our ducks in a row, so. It just goes to show we need to get that in place so everybody knows who's doing what and,
Exactly.
yeah,
Whether it's through Zoom meetings or whatever.
Or whatever,
be
yeah.
Very inclusive.
yeah.
Okay.
so just so I'm clear, there's a motion on the table about us giving them a blessing. Is that all they want? I guess is what the gist of
It
what I'm
wasn't
trying to get.
clear, at least it
Right.
wasn't clear to me in the letter what specifically they were asking
Right.
for.
Right.
But I believe it was, does the village have any objection to us proceeding with this with the province?
Right. Gotcha.
Am I correct in that?
Yep, yep.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
so we have a motion on the floor. Any more discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. School District 74, letter regarding input on former Ashcroft Elementary School. Staff did get the word out through Clinton Chatter, and there were lots of responses. Okay, thank you. Calendar of events. Free Community Volunteer Income Tax Preparation Clinic, March 1st to April 30th by appointment only. The information has been posted on the Village of Clinton website and Clinton Chatter. Could I have a motion to proceed to in-camera as per section 90.1 E and K of the Community Charter?
So moved.
Ribbit, seconder?
I'll second it.
Birch, all in favor? Okay. A short recess and then we will convene.